Her name was Dorothy. In 1958, she had never seen the inside of her neighbor Helen's bedroom. She had never seen Helen's wardrobe. She did not know what Helen paid for her refrigerator. She did not know if Helen's husband earned more than hers. She had no way of knowing, and no particular reason to find out. What she knew was Helen's actual life, the flu that knocked Helen out for 2 weeks in February, the argument with her sister that lasted the better part of a year, the way Helen's youngest still woke up screaming at 2 in the morning. Dorothy never once felt inferior to Helen. Not because Dorothy had more, because Dorothy was only ever measuring herself against one person, the woman she had been yesterday. Today, global social media advertising generated over $220 billion in 2024. Every dollar of it is built on one mechanism, showing you what you do not have. Dorothy never once saw a curated highlight reel of someone else's life. The technology did not exist, but that was not the whole reason. Dorothy had something far more durable than the absence of a screen. What Dorothy had were 10 habits so ordinary she never thought to name them. Nobody on her street called them anything either, because every woman on that street had them. No algorithm delivered them, no coach sold them, no program helped her maintain them. Then something changed. Not the human heart, not what a person actually needs in order to feel that their life is sufficient. What changed is exactly what this video is about. Before number 10, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to make. Number 10. Dorothy never saw a curated version of anyone's life. Tuesday, March 11, 1958. Dorothy knew 4 things about Helen across the street: the church she attended, the brand of coffee she bought, the fact that her husband had a bad back, and that her curtains were yellow. She did not know what Helen paid for those curtains. She did not know how Helen looked on her best Saturday morning. She did not know Helen's weight or salary or the condition of her marriage at its most polished. She knew Helen's real life, partial, unremarkable, and human. Instagram launched in 2010. Within 2 years it had reached 100 million users. By 2015 it had 400 million. The platform's own internal research, revealed by a whistleblower in 2021, found that Instagram made body image worse for 1 in 3 teenage girls, and that the company was aware of this finding. Instagram is not what Dorothy had instead of contentment. The absence of Instagram is what Dorothy had instead. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 9. Dorothy measured herself against yesterday's version of herself, not Helen, not the woman in the Sears catalog, not anyone she had read about or seen on a screen. Only the woman she had been the previous Tuesday. Was the kitchen cleaner than last week? Was the budget steadier than last month? Was she more patient with the children than she had managed to be the day before? Those were her benchmarks. They were entirely within her control, and meeting them, even partially, was possible every single day. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology has found that upward social comparison, measuring yourself against those doing better, reliably reduces life satisfaction, while comparing yourself to your own previous performance reliably increases it. Dorothy practiced the second one without a name for it, every day, for 50 years. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 1 on this list is the habit the comparison economy has spent the most money making you forget. Number 1 is still coming. Stay with me. Number 8. Dorothy was too busy living her own life to monitor anyone else's. She was not scrolling. She was not watching. She was in her kitchen, on her porch, at the market, kneeling in the garden. Her hours were occupied by actual physical presence in her actual physical life. The average adult now spends over 2 hours per day on social media platforms, according to 2024 data from Data Reportal. That is 14 hours every week spent inside systems whose entire design function is to surface what other people have, do, and achieve. Dorothy had those 14 hours. She spent them differently. She cooked, mended, walked, and talked to the real people directly in front of her. She never fell behind on her own life because she never stopped inhabiting it long enough to audit someone else's. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 7. Dorothy bought what her household needed, not what she had seen demonstrated. In 1958, American television advertising was in its early years. By the end of the decade, the average American household was watching over 5 hours of television daily. Advertisers had discovered the most powerful commercial insight of the century: show people what their neighbors have, and they will want it too. Dorothy watched one program in the evening. The television was off by 9:45. Her purchases were driven by function. The refrigerator that kept food cold, the coat that held up through winter, the shoes that did not fall apart before spring. Global advertising spending reached $1 trillion for the first time in 2024. The industry's foundational mechanism, unchanged since the 1950s, is engineered dissatisfaction, the careful, sustained work of making people feel that what they already have is not enough. Dorothy was the last generation the industry had not yet reached in full volume. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 6. Dorothy knew her neighbors' real lives, not their best days. She saw Helen when Helen was still in her housecoat at noon because the baby had not slept. She saw Agnes when Agnes and her husband had clearly not spoken in 3 days. She saw the street at its most unglamorous: burnt dinners, arguments audible through open windows, children tracking mud across freshly swept porches. She had no way to compare herself to a manufactured best version of anyone she knew because she knew too much about them. Research from the University of Michigan has found that passive social media consumption, scrolling others' content without actively posting yourself, is the behavior most strongly linked to decreased life satisfaction and measurably increased envy. Dorothy never passively consumed anyone's highlights. She walked over and knocked. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Almost at number 1, it is the quietest habit on this list, and the most disruptive to a trillion-dollar industry. Almost there. Number 5. Dorothy had one source of comparison, and it refreshed once a month. The Ladies' Home Journal. 25 cents. 160 pages, arrived at the door at the beginning of the month and was read by the end of it. That was the outer boundary of the aspirational world available to her. A single curated publication, consumed slowly, over weeks, then set aside. By 2024, the average person encounters between 6,000 and 10,000 advertising messages per day across social platforms, search engines, streaming services, and digital environments. Each one is designed to generate a gap between what a person has and what is being offered. Dorothy had 25 cents of gap exposure per month. She closed it by the 30th. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 4. Dorothy had no public number attached to her social value. She had no follower count, no engagement rate, no star rating, no salary listed on a public database where it could be ranked against her colleagues, no net worth estimate published and updated in real time. The only metrics available to her were private and domestic: whether the household was solvent, whether the children were fed, whether the house was clean. Numbers that answered to nobody but her own sense of whether the week had gone well. The self-quantification industry, wearables, tracking apps, productivity metrics, financial dashboards, is now worth over $80 billion globally. Much of it turns private experience into public-facing data, creating new categories of comparison that did not exist before the number was attached. Dorothy had no number. She had no rank. She competed with no one. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 3. Dorothy never competed with strangers. Her reference group was specific, local, and known. The 8 women she attended church with on Sundays, the 4 neighbors she spoke to over the fence throughout the week, the 2 friends she had maintained since girlhood. These were her people. She knew their real circumstances. Competition, to the extent it existed at all, was between people who understood each other's actual starting points. A meta-analysis published in Psychological Bulletin, covering 54 studies on social comparison, found that the frequency of comparison is a stronger predictor of dissatisfaction than the outcome of any individual comparison. The more often a person compares, regardless of result, the worse they feel. Dorothy compared rarely, locally, and to people she already loved. She never compared herself to a stranger across a screen who had every incentive to show only their strongest possible version. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 2. Dorothy said what she had out loud, every Sunday, before church, not in a journal, not in a gratitude app, at the kitchen table, before the household left for the morning. She said what had gone well, what was holding, what the family still had that it might not. This was not a wellness practice. She did not call it anything. It was simply how Sunday mornings began in her house, with a brief, plain accounting of what was present and intact. Research from UC Davis psychologist Robert Emmons, who has studied gratitude systematically for over 2 decades, found that people who regularly articulate specific things they are grateful for report higher life satisfaction and significantly lower rates of social comparison behavior. Dorothy was articulating her specifics every Sunday for 50 years before the research existed to explain why it worked. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 1. Dorothy believed her life was enough exactly as it was. This is the one the entire comparison economy cannot bottle, because it is not an upgrade, it is a refusal, a deliberate daily decision not to treat the current life as a draft version of the real one that will begin once a certain condition is met. Dorothy was not waiting to feel content. She was not delaying satisfaction until the kitchen was larger, the car was newer, the children were older, the savings were higher. She was not managing a gap between what she had and what she was supposed to want. She had decided, once clearly, without fanfare, that the life in front of her was the real one. The self-help and personal improvement industry is now worth over $45 billion globally. A meaningful portion of it is predicated on the premise that contentment is a destination arrived at through the right sequence of improvements. Dorothy never accepted that premise. She lived as if the destination had already been reached. She never had a coach explain this to her. She had a mother who told her once, "The woman who always wants what's next never enjoys what's here." Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Dorothy passed away in 2002. She was 83 years old. Her granddaughter, clearing out the house, found no vision board, no comparison journal, no self-improvement shelf stacked with books about becoming. She found a photograph of Dorothy and Helen, taken sometime in the late 1960s, standing at the fence between their yards. Both of them were laughing. The reason had been lost to time. Her granddaughter studied it for a long moment. She did not know what Helen's house had been worth. She did not know if Helen's marriage had been happier. She did not know if Helen's children had turned out better. She knew only that her grandmother had been laughing. Nobody at Dorothy's funeral described her as someone who had achieved a particular level of success. They said she had seemed genuinely happy with her life. 10 habits Dorothy never named, never purchased, and never once optimized. She simply called it being satisfied with what she had. What changed between Dorothy's street and the world you live in today was not what human beings need in order to feel that their life is worth living. That need has not changed since 1958. What changed was who got paid when that need was replaced by an industry built on the premise that you are always one purchase, one upgrade, one follower count away from the life you actually deserve. Pick one thing from this list. Come back in the comments in a week and tell me what it did. If you have ever looked at someone else's life and felt your own go slightly smaller, tell me below. I read every single comment. The next video is already waiting.